Welcome everyone to this episode of the Palmetto Guardian. I'm Sergeant Chelsea Baker.
And I'm Specialist David Erskine.
And today we have two very special guests with us. We have Colonel Retired Frank Chapman, and he used to be the training site manager of McCrady, which back then used to be called Leesburg Training Site. And we also have Master Sgt. Retired Curtis Hallman, and he's currently the maintenance manager out here at McCrady Training Center.
Yep. So, gentlemen, it's an honor to have y'all with us and for y'all to take time out of your day to come sit down and kind of give us a little bit of a rundown of the history of McCrady. We all, I guess, current soldiers, we know it as the training center that it is, but I guess it didn't always, wasn't always this grand. And that's what you were talking about a little bit before the show with us. When you started out here, it was not McCrady Training Center, correct?
That is correct.
So what was it? What was it when you first got out here? What was the landscape of this area when you first got here?
Well, I came out here in May of 1977, and the headquarters building was 3930, which is right across the way here. And there was a lot of Quonset huts. All this row here had Quonset huts that had been sprayed with foam insulation to keep them cool in the summer and warm in the winter. And the buildings over on the other side, on the east side, were kind of like clapboards. Some of them had some green siding on it and was later replaced with some updated siding, and of course a lot of them now are concrete. But there was 283 acres, and it was mainly used for annual training, and then the National Guard's Officer Candidate School called Palmetto Military Academy came out here in the summer also. But it was mainly an annual training site and a weekend training site. People would come on the weekends and they would stay here, and then they would do training out on Fort Jackson property.
Now, sir, you do the maintenance currently. Now, were you in kind of the same position when you first came out here, or what was your first introduction to the McCrady training site area?
We came out early on, like Colonel Chapman said, and from the unit from Batesburg D Company at that time. We hauled dirt in to build abutments in for bridges, which Saluda was driving pilings and that kind of stuff. So we did a lot of that early on to build this, starting where it's at today.
Now, as far as you mentioned that it was mainly used as annual training, at what point in time in the history of this facility did we start seeing a shift in the purpose of this land in this area out here?
Okay, excellent question, and let me proceed to answer that question by saying that one of the issues we had was we could not get money to support the site because we didn't have the usage. And in order to get the usage up, we needed to get facilities, and so we were kind of a loggerhead, and so we ended up getting some buildings from Fort Jackson that were left over from the hospital complex, and we cut them in half, and we'd move them out here, and we would repair them. We could spend $3,000 a year, and we'd bring them out here in August, and we'd spend $3,000 on them in September, and then we'd spend another $3,000 in October, one fiscal year to the other. So we started getting the usage up some. That happened during the 80s, maybe early 80s. And I don't know, when did you come on board, Curtis, full time?
84, 85.
Yeah. So were you here? You were here when we started doing some of that too, weren't you?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So at any rate, somewhere along that time, 84, 85, mid-80s or whatever, General Marchant, who was the adjutant general at the time, came out here and met with me. And he said, National Guard Bureau has asked us if we want to put a school out here, if we're willing to let one of their leadership academies and MOS and that sort of thing come out here and set up a schools program. And he says, my staff and USPFO have advised against it because it would be a lot of trouble. and so he said, but what do you think? I said, hell, sir, if we don't get that and we don't get the usage up, this place is not going to grow. And so he did, and so, you know, we got all the school stuff out here. It started coming in, and we built buildings, and so the place grew from that. And I'm not sure exactly what year it was, but I would guess it was somewhere around 83, 84, 85, along in there somewhere is when that happened. So, you know, that's when it really started growing. And then we got the contract from 283 acres to 14,000 acres of lease agreement, so that we could spend money on roads and tank trails and culverts and get equipment to maintain the tank trails and all. So it's now 14,000 acres, isn't it, Brad? 15 now, and so that grew from 283 when we first came out here.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. Whenever we come out here for drilling, you get lost in the woods, and I'm like, I've never been down this road. And that makes sense. I didn't realize that we had that much acreage out here. That's crazy to think about.
Now, he mentioned you came on around the mid '80s full time and whatnot, and so you were kind of in the heat of it as far as the build up process.
Oh yes, sir.
Now, what was that experience like for you, and where were you at position wise at that time? Were you in charge of stuff? Were you just one of the workers at that point in time? Kind of tell me what it went from your viewpoint.
Well, like Colonel Chapman was saying, when the buildings was moved in back here, I came on board as a carpenter, so we tore out stuff, put new stuff in. So everything that was on the building themselves, I got to quite talk with my hand. Everything that was in the buildings, we basically tore it out, hauled it out, and put in new electrical, new plumbing, new everything. So I was a part of that. So I stayed with the ADSW program for that, off and on, and then later got hired full-time state employee. So I've been here ever since with that. And then, I always loved the equipment and everything. So Colonel Chapman seen a position there for a grounds maintenance guy. So it's moved from grounds maintenance right on up to different things. So,
now, you mentioned that in the fact that you came on as a state employee. What have you seen as far as the progression of the maintenance of this facility and stuff?
Well, when I came here, we had just about zero equipment.
Okay.
There was 2 lawnmowers, which now there was, other than the buildings that was being renovated back here, there was a line of buildings here and a line of buildings over there. That was about the extent of it. But we've come a long way. There was no vehicles. We had a sedan, a half-ton pickup truck, and a stake body. That was all the vehicles that was here, and we managed with that. No tools, no equipment. So we have come a long way. We was in the early 90s when we got a new tractor of sorts. We were, year 2000, we got the first new truck. Everything before that had been hand-me-downs, like the buildings. Mm-hmm. So, it's been a work in progress.
Now, one other thing that people might not realize, and I'm going to make the assumption that they probably weren't here when all this kind of got kicked off, but there are some soldier comfort items that I guess have been added to the McCrady Training Center, such as the chapel and the USO folks and the shopette and stuff. When did, because, you could almost look at this as a microcosm of like a full-size base. When did that kind of transformation start happening out here and saw that movement? Before
I tell you about the chapel, let me tell you about the equipment.
Okay.
Curtis said we didn't have any equipment. And so the equipment, the bulldozers and motor graders and all, belonged to the 122nd Engineer Battalion. And so they would leave their equipment down here, and we would use it during the week, and they would come on the weekends. It just so happened that we were in real good with the commander of the 122nd at the time, who happened to be me, and so it was real easy to get the equipment, and so we used that for a long period of time. And I think even when I left, there was still equipment that belonged to the 122nd Engineer Battalion that we used.
Yeah, and I think the engineering companies still do a fair amount of training and work out here, from what I understand, which. That's kind of where it all started from then, I guess.
Somewhere in the 80s, maybe a little later on, 86, 87, or whatever, General Marchant was still the adjutant general. And he came out here one day and he said, I want a chapel. And so we went to Fort Jackson and asked them about their chapels, because still we couldn't build a chapel. Didn't have the authorization to build it, and couldn't get the funding, et cetera. So they had a chapel they were going to tear down on Tank Hill. And they said, you can have it if you want it. And so we started raising money. We did a Chapel 50 run where people left here and walked and ran all the way down Golden Line Road and Screaming Eagle Road and Hartsville Guard Road and back into Tank Hill at Fort Jackson, which was 25 miles. And then we turned around and came back, and people put X amount of dollars on each mile, X amount of money on each mile that the people ran. So raised a little money that way, and then we put it out to bid to move it, and Oswalt bid on it, Melvin Bradley bid on it, and Melvin Bradley from Saluda was low by several $1,000s, maybe $10,000 or $12,000. So he hooked it up, moved it. I made him out here one Sunday. It's kind of an aside, kind of a funny thing. He was not your normal by the book house mover, and so he wasn't real big on permits and stuff like that. So he was, and we had to have, because the Colonel's Creek Bridge down here was suspect as far as crossing it. They had to put something like 50 tires under it with all those dollies and everything to get the chapel across the bridge. And it was one Sunday morning, I came out here to see what they were doing, and they were down at the bridge, and I was down there talking to them, and they were getting everything set up. And here come the state transport people, the law enforcement transport people. They knew Melvin, and they did some pleasantries and all, and Melvin said, what's the fine today? And they said, I think they said $150. And so he pulls out $150 and gives it to them, and they thank him and they leave. And Melvin looked over at me and he said, it's just so much easier to do it this way. So he brings it and he puts it out here and we set it up. And then we had a lot of work done on it. And the full-time people here, Curtis and who was our head carpenter back then, Curtis, from Batesburg.
Harvey L. Addy.
Yeah, Harvey L. Addy. He was kind of in charge of doing the carpenter work in the chapel. We got it fixed up, and I guess it's still being used, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I'll shut up for a while.
No, it's good. It's good. I know. The reason I asked is I went in there with a lot of the chaplains from the state, and they did some training in there. I was lucky enough to be a part of it, doing some interviews and things like that. And it's actually, if you haven't been in it, it's actually super nice on the inside. And
units donated windows for it, stained glass windows and all, and you'll see the units depiction on it. And all. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's a very interesting piece out here. So back to kind of the growth of the facility in the area and stuff like that, as things have broadened and more buildings have come out here, as far as maintenance, y'all have been able to grow the maintenance section, and there goes some folks hard at work right now. But y'all have been able to grow the maintenance section. I mean, at what point in time, I guess, did y'all actually become a maintenance section? Because it sounded like it was a lot of kind of piecemeal at the beginning. When did they finally say, here, we need maintenance and we're going to start going from there?
We worked out of back of pickup trucks. Seriously, the carpenters basically had a Q hut down here. I worked out of a little old 10 by 10, 12 shop in a pickup truck for a number of years with a couple of guys. Like I said, we didn't have a whole lot to maintain. We had a lot of grounds to maintain, but the grounds too have grown along with everything else. The grounds actually grew faster than the equipment did early on. But we've been very fortunate over the last 7-8 years to get the things we need, and we can move forwards. Doing good.
Now, this is kind of a little bit of a jump around question, but still on this point, what do you think, as far as that progression has gone? I mean, you see us continuing to grow with it, or you think we're hitting kind of a pinnacle, or what's your expectations?
I won't say we're stagnant now, but it's hard to get good help that you can depend on. So we're still growing.
Still growing. Yeah. So still room to keep expanding.
Yes.
Then. Okay. Now, I guess back over to the training and the facility as a whole, it sounds like when it first started out, it was just South Carolina National Guard members, but if I'm understanding correctly, but that has changed greatly over the years. Kind of what was the push or the incentive of why that started to happen? Because we got a little bit of everybody out here, from the best I can tell now.
Yeah. Sometime in the 80s, the Marines came out here with a detachment. I think it was part of one that was downtown, and they built a facility up on the northeast side of the compound, and we had a little canteen at our headquarters building, which was not the headquarters building now. It's the one right to the west of the headquarters building now. And they'd come down and get sodas and all. And Jim Braswell, his boss, who was the state employee, the chief state employee. What was his?
He was a maintenance supervisor.
Yeah, maintenance supervisor. And so they would come in to get sodas or whatever, and the Marines, and Jim would always ask them, said, "Now, which one are y'all? Are y'all the few good ones or not?" Because they were only looking for a few good men. Every time they come in, he'd say that. But they built their facility, and I think we had already built the track, the 2-mile track, at the time, and we had to shorten it up a little bit when they built their facility and have it overlap. But we built a 2-mile track around the KD ranges, no distance ranges that were just north of the northern part of the training site.
Now, you started mentioning some of the training sites and stuff like that, and for us, I guess newer soldiers in the Guard and stuff like that, we've always had a lot of training out here between the mount site and the different ranges, and of course the schoolhouse, and now they have MOS schools or reclass that you can go through and things of that nature. That wasn't always the case, correct?
Right, and we had what we call Code 124 man days, which were training site support, and we brought on several officers. General Owens came in the, I guess, the late 80s. He'd been on active duty, and we met down in Honduras, and he was thinking about getting off active duty, and we negotiated a plan, and I told him if he would get off active duty, I'd have him a full-time job. And so he came to work out here, in about 88? 88. Yeah, and Code 124 man days. And we had some other people, other lieutenants that were out here too, and they did a lot of the engineering work and did a lot of planning and that sort of thing. And General Owens was part of the new construction that went on in the late 80s. Also, the headquarters building he was project manager for, and the Battle Sim Center, the first Battle Sim Center, not the biggest one, and so he did a lot of those projects too. So we had several people that were involved in that. And one other thing, and Curtis, you can tell me when it was, but General McCrady was always, I'm not General McCrady, General Marchant was always wanting stuff, and so he comes out here one day and he says, "I want a pond." And so that was, I guess you were here when he first came out here. I know you were involved in the construction. But he said, "I want a pond." So we got contacted Clemson Extension Service in Columbia and Fort Jackson, and they determined the area just east of here that would support a pond. So we cut the trees, and Curtis did most of the earthwork there, built a dam for it, and it had 3 springs feeding that pond. And so Curtis was clearing it out. And Curtis, why don't you tell them what happened with the springs?
It kind of disappeared.
Curtis was digging around, clearing things out, and the springs went away, all but one of them. So we said,
It's mainly still fed a little bit across the road, but we kept looking for little things and just never did materialize much. But the pond's been there a number of years. It's held well. It survived the 2015 flood. Mm-hmm. The water did actually go over the dam, so that was a blessing for us.
Yeah, but the guy that built the dam must have done it right.
Well, I probably did 90% of it, but we had a guy, Mr. Emmanuel Weeks from Soil and Water Conservation District, that worked with me just about daily. And we did make an error, and he come back and helped us fix it, and all is well.
Yeah, but the pond was not filling up because we only had one spring. So we had a problem. So we had the water tower, and we had plenty of water. And so we ran a water line all the way from the tower there down to the pond. And it ran 24/7 until the pond filled up. And I don't know, that pipe may still be there, but we ran it down. It went in right next to where the general's quarters is now. And we filled the pond up. But also, those little buildings around the pond didn't have any money. People were giving us stuff, and we were scrounging. And so I probably should let Curtis tell the story, but he goes to Fort Jackson with 2 10-ton forklifts and lowboys. And you want to tell them how you got the houses?
We did some trade-offs with some local sawmill in Elgin, and he cut us some very large timbers, so we picked the houses up with the timbers and the forklifts, and we backed the low boys under them, and we come down Leesburg Road with them. It was quite an experience, and we did well. The general's cabin was larger. We couldn't do that with that, so I rented steel from Oswald House Moving, and one of his young sons come over and helped me get it jacked up in place, and we come down the road with it too. So I had a lot of good experiences with Colonel Chapman early on, and been here ever since, and still have some challenging experiences. But it's been fun. It's been a good ride.
And General Owens had, I think, when he was at the FMO shop, he added some buildings around Varn Lake.
Now, kind of talking about that, we've talked about the buildings going up and kind of the growth of the thing, but a huge undertaking whenever you're dealing with something like this, and people might kind of glaze over it, is the infrastructure that has to be in place to deal with all this, and all the tank trails and stuff that we do have now, and the paved roads through the system, and you can go around. Everybody's got running water and all that kind of stuff, and I mean, what kind of challenges was that like, especially like I said, with a depleted maintenance group and then a lack of funds?
Well, we did increase the full-time people as the usage went up and the facilities grew. Then we were authorized more people, so we were able to grow from the full-time staff. And then on the weekends, we had it was part of a TDA, tables of distribution and allowance, that allowed us to put M-Day soldiers on duty on the weekends, and they would issue the buildings out to the people that were using it on the weekends. And so we had a weekend staff, and then we had the full-time staff also.
So obviously now that as things progress, like you said, the full-time staff grew and M-Day grew. You come out here today as you're visiting the facility and stuff. I mean, what do you think of where it is now?
Well, it has obviously grown extensively. There's been a lot of work. There's new facilities. There's new units here. The Navy's here. My next door neighbor does 185-day tours out here. He is an E9 and works for the Navy, and wherever their facilities are, he's here with them. But he's off his 185 days now, so that his turtle is in here taking his place, and then he'll be back in another 185 days to complete that tour. But it's just interesting to see the growth and remember where it was when I first came out here, and we were in 3930, the whole staff. Jim Brazel was there, and maybe one other maintenance person, myself, and maybe a secretary. But that was it. It was like 3 or 4 people. And then we built the facility down on the other end, moved down there, and then eventually the headquarters building. So it's quite interesting, quite gratifying, and a real pleasure to come out here and see the growth and see what's happened, and see what all these folks are doing now. And I know Mike Godwin is doing a lot of work here, and I appreciate Mike, what you're doing and keeping the facility growing and flourishing.
When you started back here, did you ever think that this plot of dirt would be what it is today?
No, sir. No, sir. Well, coming over here with the Engineer Battalion and watching it stay so small for so long, I never thought it would grow. But the school, like Colonel Chapman said, the school brought in, and I think they already had some weekend schools. Beanock, I think it was. They already had some of those down here, and once we got PLDC, things just continued to blossom, continued to grow, which was good. So we have just expanded like you wouldn't believe over a period of 35 years, I guess.
The Command Sergeant Major for the National Guard throughout the United States was a guy named Frank Lever. Command Sergeant Major Lever at National Guard Bureau. Well, in the 80s, he came out here as an E6, and he was with an MP detachment in one of these buildings right through here, and he was the full-time administrator for the MP detachment as an E6. And over the time, he became the school's commandant, and then he became the Command Sergeant Major for the South Carolina National Guard. And then they worked out a deal, maybe to get rid of him, I'm not sure. But at any rate, he worked out a deal with the Chief of National Guard Bureau, and so he ended up being the Command Sergeant Major for the National Guard.
So, yeah, and with that being said, obviously y'all were here for the foundation and got us going in the right direction on this thing. What do you think the possibilities are for the facility as the Guard continues to progress this area?
Well, a lot depends on the national military strategy with the National Guard and some reserve units and the Marines and Navy and that sort of thing. But as the military grows, this is an ideal site to grow. There's plenty of land. It can be expanded, and really there's no limit to what can be done if the leadership is willing to do that. And I think the facilities, all the support, the water, sewage, everything associated with it can be expanded to take on whatever role the leadership wants it to take.
You got anything?
No.
Anything? Okay, I just wanted to check. I didn't want to overtalk you on this. So I guess, this is something that we could probably sit down and we could probably talk another 14 hours going through all the details of everything. But I guess, is there anything that we maybe missed, a story or something unique that you wanted to share that maybe we didn't get to ask about or cover as we kind of went through things?
Well, there's all kind of stories.
Some of which are true.
That's the hotline calling in the background. Carry on.
But Frank made mention of the buildings that we picked up and moved. His theory was forgiveness rather than permission. So we moved the houses off of Morgan Loop to Fort Jackson and brought them out here. We had them all set up. A lot of the maintenance was not yet, hadn't been redone. Frank met me down in the hall one day. He said, by the way, we got permission to move to cabins now. The work had been done, in other words. So, I've moved forward with that same theory on some occasions, and then whenever the environmental office come around, they kind of slowed us down on a lot of that. Mm-hmm. The the forgiveness is just not there anymore.
The folks from USPFO would periodically call me up and say, Frank, I'm not sure you can do that. According to regulations, you are supposed to do so-and-so. I said, wait a minute, stop right there. I got to ask you a question. I said, what's that? I said, am I breaking any laws? I said, well, no, I don't think so, but regulation, I'm okay with the regulation. I just don't want to break any laws.
Well, you know, thank goodness y'all did take that kind of stance, because who knows, we may not be at this facility right now in this capacity had y'all not been bold enough to kind of take those steps forward and see what the potential was of the area and make it what it is today. Sorry, I got a fly attacking me there. Sorry. So yeah, you got anything to end on there, Baker?
No, you already answered all my
I
questions.
answered all your questions.
Yeah, you do that all the time.
I'm sorry.
And it's a good thing that General Owens was not in the room when I brought that up about breaking laws.
That was a time comment.
Because I kind of raised him from a pup, and so if he makes any mistakes, it's really kind of my fault.
Gotcha. Okay. All right.
So we do have a question from the audience.
Actually, I've got two.
Okay.
So prior to the National Guard acquiring Leesburg Training Site at the time, I understand it was owned by a part of the influx of training during World War II. So this was a range complex, is that not correct? Can you expound on that a little bit?
It was all these old berms that you see out here are part of what they call the KD ranges, known distance ranges. And they were used during World War II for troops to come out here and train. As a matter of fact, in 1972, I was engineer company commander on active duty at Fort Jackson. And we built the concrete pads out here for the tanks. That was before the Utes came here. And so there was a unit that had tanks, and my engineer company poured the pads for those in 1972. And it was, I'm sure it was on lease to the Guard at the time, but we did that work as active duty unit.
Very cool. And then you have one more?
And there was one more, the history of the headquarters building. Can you expound on that for us?
Yeah, and General Owens, you'll have to keep me in track and make sure I don't say anything that's classified. But at any rate, we got some money to build some new facilities, end of the year money that sometimes came out. We had X amount of dollars. I can't remember exactly how much it was, but we hired a guy to design the headquarters building, and he brought the drawings and the rendering out here for me to look at it. And I was not real impressed with it. I didn't think it looked all that good from the front. He said, well, this is just a start, and, we can add on at the back if we need to and all. And so General Marchett was coming out, and he wanted to show the rendering to him. And I think General Marchett thought we liked it and all. So General Marchett looked at it. He said, oh, it looks great. That's great. I think we need to do it. So that was the decision. We did it. But we put a lot of add and deducts, and what that was is in the bid price that we put out, we put some things in there that we could take out, such as a metal roof, some of the interior work, some of the concrete block work, and that sort of thing. And Brad, General Owens was the project officer at the time, and he probably could tell you a lot more about it than I can. But we had several deducts and that we had to employ, and then we had to use Code 124 man days, troop labor, various and sundry things to get it completed before we moved in. And I don't know whether y'all want to add anything to that or not.
Well, I thought what was unique is how you got the interior wood and the reason it looks like a half a building.
Yeah, the interior wood, we bought it from a company that specializes in importing South American mahogany and some of those stuff. We got it from downtown, and they dry it and all. And then one of the workers here, Charles Price, who was a E7 in the Saluda unit, 122nd in Saluda, was a master carpenter, and he made the paneling for several of those offices in there, which really made them look good, and several other interior things that we did. And as far as adding on to the headquarters building, it kind of looks like half a building, especially if you look at it from the east or the west. You know, it looks like it might have been cut off. Mm-hmm. Well, the thought was that we would probably expand on that. And that might be one of those future things you're talking about that we do down the road somewhere. Maybe we shall see.
Go ahead and add the other half of the building, yeah.
But Curtis was always, especially as equipment operator, it was always busy. And he was a real hands-on person. And every time I would go around to check on projects, Curtis would be down in the hole and doing stuff and all. He was kind of the leader that led by example. So we had a lot of interesting times and a lot of work done and a lot of fun doing it.
Cool.
I didn't tell too much, did I, Curtis?
No, I thought we got to cut that one out.
Anybody else got anything? Because y'all have more knowledge of this area than I do. The name change, when it changed?
Yeah, like
No.
purpose and all that.
Yeah, I don't know if we actually talked about that.
I'll hold my
Did we
phone
talk
while
about
you
that?
do this.
Well, actually, it was Leesburg when I left.
Okay.
Oh, so
Yeah.
You weren't here for the names.
I wasn't here for the name change. And so it was changed to McCrady. You know what year it was? It was after 1990. It was after
1990.
January of 90.
For our listeners, if anybody knows the exact date of the name change, how about throw it in the comment sections below? We'll have to do some research on that.
Well, it was the wet site early on, and when I came out here, it was finally designated as a training site. And so for funding purposes, the National Guard Bureau, you went from wet site, which was weekend training site, to an actual training site. And several years in the early 80s, we formed what we call and it was the National Council. It was called the Training Site Advisory Council, TSAC. And I was a member of that. And we negotiated with National Bureau on a lot of training sites throughout the United States, upgrading the training site managers from GS whatever to whatever, getting additional people, getting additional funding and that sort of thing. And so it was real interesting working with that group, and we traveled all over, mostly in the Southeast, but it affected training sites nationally.
Outstanding. That's super cool. There's a lot of stuff still to learn about this area and stuff, and it seems like there's a bunch of people that y'all can't see that are behind the camera today, and they've all got like their own little piece of the puzzle of this thing, because we have a pretty wide range of time frame for being involved in this facility. I can only speak of it as a user, as a soldier who's used the facility and stuff, and it's been awesome. And I've been able to come out and cover a lot of interesting training and things like that, and the main public affairs detachments in a building out here, because this is where a lot of stuff goes on. And who would have thought, like y'all said, when y'all had this little patch of ground out here with just a weekend training site, that it would become this grand. All right, well, we learned a lot of information about McCrady Training Center today, and what it used to be and what it is, and hopefully what would have become one day. So if you like the video, make sure you hit like, subscribe, hit the notification so you get new content, and make sure you comment on the video so we can kind of know what we're doing well and what other future stuff we might do. I think we'll probably continue with a whole series of video, because I think there's a lot to learn about the McCrady Training Center. So keep an eye out if you're interested in the facilities and what's going on with this area. We're going to produce more content on this.
Yeah, especially if you were a part of all the history that they were talking about. That would be awesome to get other viewpoints on it. And I'm definitely curious about when the name changed.
Yeah, we're going to find that out. We're going to find that out. Somebody's either going to leave us a comment or we're going to find it ourselves. One of the two. We'll get that information.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm Sergeant Chelsea Baker.
And I'm Specialist David Erskine.
And we'll catch you in the next episode.